Now, many of you are probably aware of OpenAI and ChatGPT, but did you know there's an entire array of amazing models and AI tools that might be more suitable for your work? In fact, when I discovered some of these AI models, I was blown away by the possibilities. And many of them are super cheap, and some are even 100% free too. In today's video, we'll explore some of these AI models you've probably never seen before, and later in the video, I'll also showcase a proof of concept app that I built that works with these AI models. Now, before we get started, as always, all the apps and all the resources that I talk about on this channel can be viewed and or cloned when you join our amazing Patreon community. And if you're still not a member of our incredible, rapidly growing Patreon community, then you're greatly missing out, and you can learn more and hopefully join via the first link in the description below the video. So there are actually a bunch of tools out there that give you access to all kinds of AI models, some cheap ones, some free ones, using a standard interface. So one tool is called Open Router here. You can reach it at openrouter.ai. Another tool is called informatic.ai, and another tool is called together.ai. Now, the most popular tool is Open Router, and this is the tool that we're going to be talking about today. So if you head over to openrouter.ai, you're going to be on this page here. This is a unified interface for LLMs. Okay, so you can find the best models and prices for your prompts. So if you click on browse here, you're going to be seeing all the models that you have access to, and you can kind of learn more about it, right? So right now it is sorted by newest. You can sort it by top weekly here, and you're going to be seeing kind of the top models here. You can also sort it by pricing, low to high. Okay, so you can see, the cheapest models to the most expensive models. You can also sort it by the context. Okay, so you can see some of the models with a large context. Okay, so here you have different stats. This is Google, 2.8 million contacts. You have pricing here, etc., etc. Another thing is you can search for a model, right? So let's say you want to use Google, right? You can simply type Google, and you're going to be seeing different Google models here, right, that you can use. You can also type OpenAI, and you're going to be seeing all the OpenAI models. Now, it's important to mention that this tool doesn't give you access to just all kinds of esoteric models that you may not have heard about before, right? You also get access to models that we all know, such as, OpenAI's this new GPT-4o, GPT-4o here, 4 Turbo, etc., etc. And so you get access to all kinds of models, whether this is modern models, new models, old models, models that you may not have heard about, and models that you probably have heard about before. Okay, so all kinds of amazing models. And once you decide to use a particular model, let's say you're thinking about using this model, you can simply click here and you can learn more about it, right? You can see when it was updated, you can see the context size, the price for input tokens, the price for output tokens, the price for images, image generation, etc. And you can kind of learn more about this model. But one of the advantages of using a tool such as Open Router is that it gives you a standard interface. Okay, so if you're building apps, your call, your API call is going to be the same, except the only thing that you're going to be doing is changing the model here, right? So it makes it super easy and kind of predictable to build all kinds of apps, knowing that you could switch around the models, or you can even have the user switch out the name of the model, as you're going to be seeing a little bit later in the proof of concept app that I'm going to be demonstrating. Okay, so here you can specify the model, and everything else is very, very standard. So if you've built apps that use, ChatGPT, OpenAI, you're gonna feel right at home with this kind of API setup, because it's very, very similar, if not almost the same as OpenAI. Okay, and so here's OpenAI ChatGPT, and here we can, let's say we search for Google. This is Gemini Flash 1.5. And so if I scroll down, you see it's very, very similar, the API call, the format of the body, except here we are specifying another model. Okay, and here you can see This is an API call for TypeScript, so JavaScript. You can switch over to Python, Ruby, and Shell. Now, another thing that you can do is you can go back here and you can actually chat with these models, right? This is awesome because that way you can test out the model before you decide to use it in your own applications. So if I click on chat over here, I am greeted with this chat interface here. And I already have a model here, and this is a model I was testing before. So I can disable it if I want. So here I can pick another model. And so let's say I want to use a free model, right? This is one of the another advantages of using this tool is you have access to 100% free models that you can use in your app. So if I type free, I have this model, I have this model. So let's say I want to use this model, Hugging Face, and this is this actually model here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to remove this model. Now I have this model here enabled. And so now I can ask it the all-important question of what's the meaning of life. Okay, so if I type what's the meaning of life and I have this model selected, I can just do that. And I'm getting this kind of streaming response in this chat view here. Okay, and it's also telling me how many tokens per second it generated here, how many tokens in total, and the seconds, right? How many seconds it took to actually generate. And here I can follow up with another all-important question. How do I make the best of my life? Send it here, and it's thinking, and now it's generating, okay? So we're gonna wait for this to generate, and it's telling me how many tokens per second. We have this real-time view, and it looks like it has created like a top 10 list of some suggestions to help me make the best of my life. Okay. So I can keep chatting with this, but if you decide, okay, I want to use this model in my apps, then all you need to do over here is you can copy this code. And when you copy this code, you can paste it here. You're going to have this sample code that you can use in your apps. And here you can see you have this URL, which is going to be the same. You have a post request. You have a bunch of headers here, okay? And then you have the body. And that's enough for you to kind of go out and build your own apps, whether you're using just standard code or even no code, as you're going to be seeing a little bit later. Now, let's say I also want to check out another model, right? So let's say I'm set on using free models, okay? So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to click here, and I'm going to search for another free model. And let's say I like this model here, right? I have heard good things about it. So I'm going to select this model. And now I have two models selected. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable this model. And now I have this new model here enabled. And so here I can just copy this and I can ask it the same question. Okay, now I'm going to wait. And you see this model is a lot faster, right? I think it's almost like 10 times faster, if not even more, than the previous model, right? Almost 250 tokens per second. You saw how fast it generated, right? So I can ask it this other question right here, actually this question here, paste that in there, and let's see what happens. You see how fast it is. It's lightning fast, right? So right away I see that this model is faster than the previous model, and actually in absolute terms, it's relatively fast, right? So maybe I want to ask it another question, list all the countries in the EU, and let's see what it does. And you see it's fairly fast. It's fairly fast. I can ask it, what's the capital of Spain? Okay, and it knows, the capital of Spain. I can also get a feel of, how it likes to answer. Okay, because some models, they just give you this, right? They just give you the answer. And this model, it likes to give you a little bit more information, right? It gave you a little bit more context around the answer and also kind of the question that you had, okay? So now we can see that this is actually a good model. It's able to answer the questions, and it's also very, very fast. But let's say you don't want to work like this. Let's say you want to have these models work simultaneously, right? Answer questions simultaneously. And you can do that as well by enabling both of these models, right? And so now let's say I say, what are all the countries in Europe, okay? What are all the countries in Europe, okay? I'm gonna have both of these models generate, and I can see what's happening, okay? So as you can see, this is 18 tokens per second. This is 124. And it's already done, right? This model is already done, and this model is not done yet, right? So this took 3 seconds. This is still generating, and I can kind of open this up, and this took 16 seconds, and this took, as you can see, 3 seconds, right? Another thing that I can do is I can say, what are the 10 or 20 major cities in the US, right? Okay, and now I can see 180 tokens per second, 27 tokens per second. So this model is a lot faster. They're both free. And if you open this up, you can see a list here. Okay, so this model, it added a little bit more information, but it's a lot faster, right? Now I can also add another model. Let's say I want to search for another free model. How about this model right here? We have all of these enabled. Now I can ask it a question. List all the countries in Europe. Okay, so that it has something to work on. List all the countries in Europe. I'm gonna do that, and now I have 3 of these models working simultaneously with me. Okay, so let's wait, and now it's generating, and this is still faster, right? This is 45, 73, 98, 27. So this is the second fastest, this is the fastest, and this is the slowest. Okay, so I can open this up, and here's listing all the things here. Here is a list of all the countries in the EU. Here are the countries in Europe, the 20 major cities in the United States, because it has the context from before, right? And so it was able to kind of work with the other things. But this model only answered the question that I posed just now. Okay, so now you can go ahead and you can compare it. You can add another model if you want. So I can search for another model. I can keep adding models. And these are free models, right? We also have paid models, right? So if I search for like OpenAI here, I have all of these models. Now, these are going to be paid models. And so you can use these models to compare as well. But I am mainly interested in focusing on free models just to see how good they are, okay? So not only does this give you kind of a way to kind of look at different models, but you also have a very easy way to compare these models in real time, right? So let's say I want to clear this chat and I want to start over. So I have these 3 models. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say list all the countries in Latin America. Okay, and let's see what happens. And now it's thinking. This is fast. You see, it's still thinking. This is 22. So this is easily the fastest and the best model out of all of this, right? So it's done already in 1.4 seconds. This one took 6.2 seconds, and this one timed out. Okay, so this last one timed out. Let's see if we can get it. Let's see if it works again. So we're gonna copy this, and let's see, we're gonna copy this right here. We're gonna execute this here, and let's see. Okay, so now it's working. Just failed once, but now it's working. It took 2.8 seconds. Okay, so not bad at all. Second fastest. And at this point, if you're happy with this model, you can simply click over here, and that's going to open up its profile, right? So as you can see, it was updated December 5th, so quite a while ago, right? This is the context. It's absolutely free, right? 0 for, for million input tokens, 0 for million output tokens. You can kind of learn the providers here, right? Only one provider. The apps that were built using this model, the activity, the parameters, uptime, etc., etc. So if you're interested in kind of using this model, because it's absolutely free, you can kind of read more about it, see when it was last updated, etc., etc., and then decide whether this is a model that you want to use. And it goes without saying that if you're willing to pay, you obviously are going to have access to a lot more models, and there's lots of cheap models as well that work really, really well. And you can take a look at trending and see all of these models. So let's say you want to use OpenChat. It's only 8 cents for a million input tokens, as well as 8 cents for a million output tokens. And if you compare that to Chat GPT, right? If you search for OpenAI, you're gonna see that it's a lot more expensive. It's $5 for a million input tokens and $15 for a million output tokens. Okay, so you can see the difference right away, right? So OpenChat is only 8 cents for a million input tokens and 8 cents for a million output tokens. Okay, so you can do the math there, and you can see that this model is a lot cheaper. It has an 8 6K context, and you can see that it was updated recently as well, and it has a much higher context. Okay, so depending on what you're trying to do, you can find the model and you can actually save a lot of money with some of these models as well after you kind of testing it out. And so Open Router is an amazing tool that makes it super easy for you to take a look at all of these models, compare them, and kind of decide the kind of model that you want to be using. Now, let's say you want to build a no-code app to interface with this tool and create a chatbot. Well, let me show you a proof of concept app that I built that does just that. So here we are in Flutterflow, which is my favorite no-code tool that makes it super easy and super hassle-free to build all kinds of apps that you may be thinking about. And I went ahead and I built a chatbot that uses Open Router as a way to pick the model and have a conversation with that model. And remember, as a member of our incredible Patreon community, you're going to get access to this app so that you can view and or clone it in your spare time from your own account. Now, before I show you how I build this app, let's go ahead and run this app so that I can show you exactly how it works. Now, I have this app saved on my computer. I simply went over here and I executed this command. So let's go ahead and execute it locally, okay? All right, so here's the app, and this app has two tabs. Okay, so the first tab, we're gonna be seeing just the standard responses, non-streaming. And the second tab, we're going to be seeing the streaming responses, so that way you can compare the behavior. Now, before we enter a query, we need to pick the model. So if we click over here, we can pick the models. So here I just chose like 3 random free models that we can experiment with. And if you recall, this is the model that we were just using on the other UI that we determined was fairly fast and also fairly accurate. So let's go ahead and start out with this model here. And let's go ahead and ask a question. So let's say something like, what are all the countries in Europe? Okay, so something like this. There's the question and there's the answer. Okay, and you saw that wasn't streaming, it just gave it, right away. Okay, so here we have the countries here, and we can ask it another question. List 10 major cities in US. There's the question and there's the 10 cities. And let's go ahead and ask it something else. Give me 10 tips to do in Barcelona. Okay, there's the question and it's thinking, and there's the 10 things to do in Barcelona. All right, so that is the first model. Let's go ahead and try out one of these other models. Let's go ahead and try this model here. A list 10 countries in Asia, and it's thinking, and there's the list. Give me 10 tips, or I don't know, 15 tips to do in NYC. It's thinking and thinking. And there's our list. There's our 15 things. And that response actually took some time. And one reason was because that model is fairly slow, but also because it wasn't streaming. All right, so as you can see, these models work just fine. And now let's go ahead and jump over to our streaming demo. So we're going to select this first model, and we're going to ask it to list 15 countries in Latin America. Go ahead and click send. And right away, we're getting an answer. Okay, so it's streaming, and this model is fairly fast, so you don't really see that, but we got the answer fairly quick. And let's say, give me 15 tips to do in Madrid. Okay, gonna have a hit send. And now it's streaming, and that answer is being displayed as the model is sending. So it's a really, really nice behavior, and I think a lot of people would really appreciate that. Let's go ahead and switch models. Let's go to this model here that we tested before. List, 20 countries in Asia. Okay, so something like this, hit send. And now as you can see the difference. It's streaming, but it's not as fast. It's kind of like how GPT-4 was when it first came out. Okay, all right, so it's listing the countries, and I actually asked it for 20 countries and it came up with 46 countries. Okay, so keep that in mind, right? Keep that in mind. Give me 10 tips to do in Mexico City. Okay, let's go ahead and see what it comes up with. It's thinking. Okay, now it's generating, so it's fairly slow. I mean, it's still doable. And I asked it for 10 things and it came up with 10 things. Okay, so pretty good. Okay, let's ask it one more thing. Explain the meaning of judicial process thinking, and there it is. There's the judicial process. All right. Okay, so you can kind of compare the different models, but you can also kind of decide whether you like the standard behavior or the streaming behavior. I personally like the streaming behavior. I think a lot of users will agree because that way they can see the response in real time, but it's really up to you. But with this app, you have the option to kind of to go with the method that you prefer. All right, so now that we've seen this demo, let's go ahead and jump into Flutterflow so that I can show you exactly how I build this app. All right, so here we are back in Flutterflow, and the first thing that I want to point out is that we have two pages. Okay, we have the regular behavior. This is the first tab, and we have the streaming behavior. That is the second tab. Now, the way it's set up is about 80% similar, except there's one major difference that you need to understand to get it working that I'm going to be showing in just a second. The next thing that I want to show you is our app state, right? Very, very important. All the, all the pages, all the widgets have access to it. So you want to know how it's set up. And so if we click over here, we have our app state messages, which is a list of this data message type. And what is message type? Well, message type is this thing here, right? And so for each message, we're storing the type, the role, the message, the image URL, and the timestamp. Now, this model will support images and audio in the future. Okay, so I started kind of working with some of the images functionality, processing images, maybe even generating images. But right now, it doesn't support that, but it will support it in the future. So you can kind of ignore the image stuff here. And the type, for all intents and purposes, is only going to be text right now, but later on we'll expand it. Okay, so that is our app state, which is a list of, this message type, complex type, this data type here. Next, I want to show you my API setup. So I only have one API call, and we are connecting to this open router, and we have our headers here. You need to get a key, regardless of whether you're going to be doing free models or paid models. And if you go into body, that is our body. We are specifying the model on the fly, so you can change the models as you wish. And here we have the messages, and we're also going to be sending the previous messages, so that way the model has context. And for the variables, these are all our two variables, the model and the messages, and that way we can test things out. So here I have a sample prompt here. What's the meaning of life? We have the model here, and I can hit text and I can send this, and I get a response. The meaning of life is etc., etc. And if you scroll down, we are capturing this response as a JSON path, right? So that way we can refer to it whenever we need to display the response, the answer from the model. So now that we covered that, let me show you how this app works. Now, there are two main areas that I want to show you in this app: listing the messages and sending the messages. Okay, so when it comes to listing the messages, that is fairly straightforward, right? We have a list view that has a stack, and inside the stack we have rows. Now, the purpose of using the stack is that we can display the children alternatively, right? So if it's a message that comes from an AI, from the bot, it's going to be displayed here, right? Assistant, role is assistant. Otherwise, if it's my message, it's going to be displayed here. And for my messages, I have them right justified. And for the AI messages, I have them left justified. Okay. Now, this list view is obviously being fed by our page state here. Okay. So for the page state, I have the same thing. I have this messages data type here. So, this thing here is only going to be available on this page, which is kind of how we want, because we have multiple pages and we don't want that state to kind of leak over to the next page. Okay, so here we're displaying the messages sorted by timestamp, and that way all the new messages are being displayed towards the bottom, and the older messages are shown first, and the new messages are showing last. And that is kind of what we have when we're displaying all the messages. And so this is kind of straightforward. But where a lot of the magic is happening is when you're sending the messages, right? So here we have input message, text field, we have this input model drop down. And if we scroll down, you can see that I have some free models here. And I'm using the labels and values. And that way I can display the labels here. And then the actual values is what's actually being captured on the back end. And this button is where, once we click send the message, this is where the magic happens. So we're going to open this up. And there's a couple of things happening here. So the first thing we need to do is we need to save the message that the user is sending. This happens before the API call. So if the user sends, types something, we want to save it regardless. So we are basically adding it to this messages list and the page state. We're creating this message using this input message on the current time. Next, we execute the API call with the model that the user has specified and the messages. Now, the messages here captures the query as well as the previous messages. And we have a custom function that basically gets all of that and creates a string that contains the current message as well as the previous messages. So that way the model has context so that it can refer to things that we talked about previously in the previous messages. And this thing basically spits out a string that the model can accept. And this goes into this messages here. Next, we get a response from the model. Now, this model is going to output the response in this API output. And once we have the response, we're going to add it to list, right? So if you scroll down, we have this response from this API output, which has a predefined path, just like how I showed you. And we basically save that message in our page state. And last but not least, we clear the input text field so that it's empty by the time we want to enter a new query, okay? Which is a nice touch here. And this essentially gives you this standard behavior where you send a message and you need to wait for that API call to complete. Okay, so depending on the model, depending on the type of query, if you ask it for something quick or something more complex, the user might be waiting, anywhere from like 5 seconds to 10, 20, or even more, depending on these factors. Okay, so that is the standard behavior. Next, let's jump over to our streaming behavior. And this works exactly the same way, except a couple of things. Okay, so if we click on the send button, this send button flow, we're not executing an API call from Flutterflow because we cannot have that streaming behavior, right? If you execute an API call directly, you're not going to be getting the data back in chunks. You're gonna have to wait for the response and then get the entire response, the entire answer. And so instead of executing the API call using the standard way, I'm creating a custom action that executes the API call for me and also supports streaming as well. And so this is the exact same flow, except we have a custom action instead of a standard API call. And so what we're doing here is we are saving the message that the user has entered. And note, I'm using regular app state here because it's easier to access it inside of our custom action. And so here I have a custom action, and this custom action takes in a bunch of parameters. So we need the API key for open router, we need the message, we need the type of message, and we need the model. Okay, once it has all of that, it executes the API call, and then it gets it on a chunk by chunk basis. Okay, so we're getting it chunk by chunk, word by word, and that way we can display it. Okay, so this is our custom action. And if we jump over here, you're going to be seeing it right here. This is our custom action. It has all of these parameters. And I built this custom action to essentially execute this API call. And as we're getting the response, what we're doing here is we are rebuilding the page. And so when this FF app state, something that I talked about in some of the previous videos, allows you to have access to our app state inside of our custom actions or custom widgets. And when you do this notify listeners, you're basically rebuilding the widgets that depend on this app state. And so here I am basically getting the chunks and I'm updating our app state. But if I don't do this, I won't be able to see that new widgets, those recently updated widgets with the new chunks immediately. It's going to be updated like later on. And so when I do this notify listeners, I'm getting that nice behavior, right? I'm getting this really clean behavior. If I ask something like this, I'm getting this buffer by buffer, chunk by chunk behavior there. And that is really, really nice. And so this is my custom action here. You can simply pass the parameters, specific to your application, more specifically the API key, the message, the type, and the model, and it's going to go ahead and execute it. and it's going to display it on a chunk by chunk basis here. And so that is the main difference between these two pages. In the first page, I'm using the standard API call, and in the second page, I am using the custom action to do that streaming behavior where I'm getting chunk by chunk. And needless to say, when you join our amazing Patreon community, you're going to get access to this app, which means that you can learn exactly how I built it. You can continue building it and make it into something else, or you can just pull out the components, the widgets that you deem necessary and use them in your own apps. Everything that I do should be very, very flexible and easy to use. Now, when you run this app, make sure that you run it locally, and you can do that by coming in here and copying this, or better yet, coming in here and doing Flutterflow local run. There are some issues when you combine that streaming behavior and when you execute this app right here on Flutterflow. So it's a lot better to do it manually, and that is, after all, something that you should be doing if you want to make sure that your app works properly. Now, when you join our amazing Patreon community, you're not only going to get access to this app, you're going to get access to all the apps that I've published on this channel. That means you can view and or clone them and learn from them, improve on them, and build all kinds of amazing apps. There's tons and tons of apps out there in all kinds of niches, in all kinds of difficulty levels. So anything from very, very simple up until, more complex, production ready apps that took me days and weeks and sometimes even longer to build. Everything is there. Plus, you're going to get access to all the future apps that I'm going to be publishing as well. And you're also going to get access to extra content, such as our Patreon supported masterclass series, which is our deep dive tutorials where I break down a particular concept, maybe an app or a tool, in a very comprehensive fashion. So if you're looking for more content, you are looking to get access to all of these apps, you're looking to take your no-code knowledge to the next level, and you're also looking to, of course, support this channel and support my work, then you definitely need to join our amazing Patreon community, where you're going to be surrounded by other ambitious and amazing people that are very, very serious about no code and are interested in helping each other out. And you can get access to all of that by clicking the first link in the description below the video.